There's a race of beings upon the planet increasing in number, although visually and physically indistinguishable to most humans. They are the bringers of the new, the bringers of light. They're here to guide the awakening of terrestrial consciousness. Now, what I wanted to know was, where is the evidence? Because that sounds wonderful, and I do believe that this is what's going on. But we need to look at the evidence. She also talks about the fact that the DNA of the star kid has tenfold the amount of information. So we have to look at that, and we have to say, well, where again is the evidence of that? Many of those that would see themselves as star kids or indigos, crystals, golden children, children of light. The metaphysical community has many names for these different types of children being born now. And even ordinary grandparents, if I speak to the Rotary or I'm talking at a library, will say the grandparents will notice that their grandchildren are different somehow, even although they can't quantify it. So this is something that's been noticed in mainstream. I meet teachers that tell me the children are different now. So what is the evidence? First of all, what I have discovered is that it's global. And in the Himalayas, there's evidence of children there that show strange behavior. Children using unknown sign languages. Children who draw pictures of triangular objects flying in the sky, and that they communicate with telepathy with unseen ETs. So this is in the Himalayas. We have in Mexico similar kind of story. Mexican children that also manifest similar behavior. Many in the area reporting a long time UFO sightings, young children, extra agile, this is how it was written, and very talented. Their problem-solving skills have increased. They're much more disciplined, continually using strange sign language among themselves. And in Mexico City alone, 1,000 children have been identified who are able to see with various parts of their bodies. And I actually saw on a DVD a young lady of 17. And not only could she, when she was blindfolded, actually describe with her hand, scanning the photograph, what was on the photograph, but when they put a newspaper under her feet, she could read the headlines through her shoes. So it seems like we've got abilities that we are only just tapping into. What's fascinating also in China, there's been discovered that there are a lot of children in China with similar abilities. And Paul Dong calls these China's super psychics. And they are also showing amazing psychic and intuitive abilities. They have the ability to open flower buds with thought alone, display telekinetic abilities, as well as other fascinating multidimensional skills such as sensing others' thoughts. Being reported that the Chinese government has observed these children changing the human DNA molecule in a petri dish before cameras and scientific equipment to record this supposedly impossible feat. There are many other things that they actually have been able to identify, and these children are now being fostered and being encouraged throughout China. So, what do the star kids themselves tell me? That not only do they have memories of being on spacecraft and being educated, they often have past life memories, including ones where they are not human. Information they have not consciously learned seems to be downloaded in many different ways, and I'm going to talk about the downloads in a minute. They have a sense of purpose, a sense of mission. They feel, excuse the pun, alienated on this planet.
Tom, tell me about the hybrid humans.
This is one of the things that I didn't even expect would arrive in our study. There is academics who actually believe that there is a hybridity program that is going on right now. And this took me on a kind of a long journey that brought me back to one question, Sid, and that is why in ancient days when the giants, the first original hybrid humans, right, when they were created by fallen angels and were upon the earth, what was their mission, what was their program? It also had to do with hybridity, and it also had to do with misleading and misguiding and even challenging God himself. But notice that the oldest descriptions of those giants, how tall tall they were, 20 feet, 30 feet. They would be easy to pick up, right? There's a movie out there right now, Jack the Giant Slayer, and it's kind of based on that mythos that exists in every culture around the world. They tell the story. The gods came down. The gods mingled themselves with humans. They took human genetics, animal genetics. They created a hybrid body. Now the question is, down through time, you know, the Bible tells us there were giants in those days and also after that. So now we get past the flood, and you have the Og, the king of Bashan. What is he, 12 feet tall? He's certainly not 20 or 30. And it looks to me like there was an intentional breeding down in size of these hybrid humans until today they could possibly be walking among us, and we might not even know that we see them. There are academics who actually believe now that they are walking among us, that they're even in government.
According to Bashar, and to my understanding, and I do resonate with this, these indigo, crystal, star kids coming in, there's many possible scenarios of how they're becoming so light and bright and psychic. And one of the things that Bashar talks about is that the genetic material is actually modified in these abduction scenarios, and they're kept, so they manipulate the egg or whatever's going on, they put it into the woman, and she actually then has the kid with her husband and the mom, and then, you know, part extraterrestrial. So for me, and based on what I've talked about with my dad and my mom and people around me, I think I have some genetic material that is part extraterrestrial more than most would.
My first abduction occurred in 1957 when I was 5 years old in Rogersville, Tennessee, a very small town in Upper East Tennessee. My brother John was with me at the time. Above the hill behind our house, we came upon what appeared to be a round house under construction. And one man, a taller looking figure, he had a rod, long rod in his hand. A light was emitted from it, and we were paralyzed.
It is at this point that Jesse Long's conscious memory of what happened ends. He says it's only through hypnosis that he's been able to remember the rest of this first abduction. What you are seeing is actual footage of Jesse undergoing hypnotic regression.
You will not be
I remember being taken into the craft, taken into one room. I was placed on a very cold, flat table. My brother was separated, and he was taken into another room. They were doing something down to my legs. I could feel them poking and prodding around my legs.
According to Jesse, his abductors inserted a small item, an alien implant, into his left shin.
And it was in my body for 34 years.
Could you feel it inside you? What did it feel like?
It was always painful. I always had to wear my socks below the incision point because it was painful.
In 1991, Jesse had the foreign object removed from his leg.
There it is.
This is actual footage of that procedure.
That's a good half-inch long.
This is the object that was in my leg. And unfortunately, during the initial test that was done on it, it was broken into 2 pieces. But that allowed us to look at the inside.
Some have dismissed the object as simply a shard of glass. But when it was analyzed at Southwest Research Institute, a materials analysis facility in Texas, the conclusions suggested a greater mystery. According to the lab's report, the object revealed a very remarkable composition and exhibited unique surface characteristics that cannot be explained, and that the questions outnumber the answers.
When the object was removed, I was convinced that whatever this object was had something to do with all of my abductions.
Jesse Long believes he has experienced a number of abductions since that first incident in 1957. And they became more and more horrific as he grew into an adult.
Most of my abductions occurred very similarly. When they brought me into the craft, they would take me down a long hallway. They would place me on a flat table. Of course, I was paralyzed and had to be because I was kicking and screaming. I didn't want to be there. The experiments on the table included a sperm extraction. The sperm extraction procedure is the most traumatic and has caused me the most problems in that they actually force me to crossbreed with what seems to be a female being.
Okay, you're gonna wake up. 1, 2.
And those people tend to be the people who are boundary deficit disordered. They have problems with relationships. They always say, I've always felt like an outsider. I don't feel like I belong. They can't hold jobs. They just have a tough time in life. And telling this person who's been lost and outside and alone that they do belong, that they're an abductee, that they have an identity, and that there are other people just like them, answers all of those questions for them.
Jesse, when you tell people about your experiences, do they believe you?
You know, it's not my job to convince anybody. It's my job just to tell you what I've experienced. If you believe it, fine. If you don't believe it, I don't care.
This is evidence that can't be ignored, and the story just gets more and more disturbing. What Jesse says happened to him in 1990 may answer the question that hangs over every abduction account. Why is this being done?
I was driving from California to New Orleans, and right outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico, on I-40, my car was lifted off the interstate up into a craft with me in the car. I was taken aboard the craft, placed on a table. I was presented with a baby. I was told, this is your child.
What happened then?
And there were 9 other children standing along the wall. They all looked at me, and I could see, yes, they were mine. Each of the children who were standing along the wall walked up to me lying on the table, and they each touched my hand as they walked by and looked me straight in the eyes. And they walked on out of the room. And the message I was getting from them was, we're okay. Thank you.
If you could confront your abductors, what would you say to them?
If I could sit down with one of them right now and ask them one question, I would want to know why me and for what reason.
We have thousands and thousands and thousands of people coming forward with these cases, not only around the United States, but around the world as well.
David Jacobs based his book, The Threat, on the explosive issue of hybrids, the crossbreeding of aliens with humans. For Jacobs, stories like Jesse Long's are only the beginning.
I think we are looking at a catastrophic situation. I think we are looking at a disaster. We are seeing a unified program here with these beings, a program of physiological exploitation by one species of another. And I know this sounds absolutely insane. We're looking at a colonization program in some way.
Now that sounds astonishing. Sounds like a sci-fi movie, right?
It does. In fact, why is Hollywood glamorizing all these things at the same time?
Well, that's exactly right. So is that part of the setup? Are there occultists in Hollywood that have an agenda to try to help prepare humanity for what could be a kind of great deception?
Genesis 6:9 talks about Noah. Explain that.
Our research led us to believe that something that happened in ancient days could be occurring even now as we speak. And when I say ancient days, I'm talking about the days of Noah, a time when all of the ancient records from around the world tell us that very powerful angels came down and they mingled with humans and with animals.
The best record is the Bible. The Nephilim is what he's talking about. Go ahead.
Absolutely, the Nephilim. And it was a period of time in which only Noah, and therefore by extension his children, were found, according to the Old Testament, perfect. When you study why the great flood came, the scripture makes it very clear that it happened because all flesh, both man and beast, had been corrupted. So something was happening in ancient days that had to do with the genetic degradation of God's creation.
What does it mean when it says in the Torah about Noah that he was perfect?
Yes, this is the Hebrew word temyem. Means it's the same phrase that's used to describe an unblemished sacrificial lamb. It's talking about genetics. It's talking about his DNA had not been corrupted, as evidently the rest of the world had been by that time. So there was a saturation, an intermarriage between angels and humans, and then through intermarriage this was spreading over hundreds of years until finally, by the time we reach Noah, he's the last specimen left that has a genetic makeup, his DNA, as God had made it. And therefore, you understand why God has to send this flood to wipe out all of this contaminated forms of life, and sent this judgment in the days of Noah. Now, Jesus says, as it was in the days of Noah.
Oh, yes. Tell me this. In the parable of the wheat and the tares, the weeds, the wheat and the weeds, the Messiah said, let them grow up together. Don't pull them out. I'm wondering if that's the difference between those whose DNA has not been corrupted and those whose DNA has been corrupted, perhaps through a hybridization process of these aliens. What do you think?
You know, Sid, behind the scenes right now, this question is unfolding among academics in a way that you can't even possibly imagine, where they're asking the question, have we concluded that hybrids are among us? And if hybrids are among us, can they even be saved?
Suzanne Hansen is a very dear friend of mine who's had experiences all her life. She's a former teacher. She now runs UFocus New Zealand and has had many conscious experiences. She's been taken aboard craft many, many times. She's also been shown her children on the craft. And she's going to confront some of you that perhaps still feel that a lot of the Zetas and Greys are in fact robotic-like creatures, because that's not been her experience. And it's not been the experience of many of my clients. Now, this is a particularly fascinating experience that Suzanne had. She was told to come and see me and have a regression. She flew over from New Zealand to Perth, not exactly cheap, but she was told that this was one, she shouldn't have any come in with any mandate, any particular experience. She had to be open to what we explored. So this was totally, in any way, not a conscious experience. But I want to demonstrate something very, I believe, very profound.
My name is Suzanne Hansen, and I'm the director of a New Zealand UFO sighting and contact research network called UFocus NZ. I have experienced contact with extraterrestrial species since early childhood. Today I will describe two directly related experiences on board craft, which demonstrate how some souls are altered, educated and fostered by ET species as a part of ongoing constructive programs and agendas for the future benefit of mankind. In 1962, when I was 8 years old, I was taken on board a craft and into a large familiar room that I had visited often with other human children. Here we learned to interact and socialise comfortably and competently with other species of ET children, using enhanced telepathy and sentiency. On this occasion, I was taken aside by an adult grey and asked if I'd like to meet another child somewhere on board the craft.
Before I go any further, I just want you to be aware of the little cradle that you're seeing in this picture. And that particular cradle, when Suzanne first saw it, she burst into tears. And she says, I know that cradle. And she described the fact that when she'd had, and she had a very difficult childhood, that when she'd had a particularly traumatic time on Earth with her human family, she was put on that cradle. And it actually had certain frequencies that would rebalance her energy field. And she burst into tears because she had been shown such compassion and such love.
The grey telepathically conveyed thoughts, pictures and explanations to me regarding this child and its life. But the volume of information was too great to retain consciously, and I was just left with an overall impression regarding meeting a new friend. The grey told me about the child with considerable care, and I sensed there was something he was not yet telling me, but he was seeking my cooperation with this meeting. We proceeded to a small room and waited, and I felt excited about meeting a new friend. Two greys entered the room with a vibrant blue ball of light floating in the air between them. As I stared at the ball in surprise, having expected a child to arrive, I experienced profound feelings of love and familiarity and sobbed at these unexpected thoughts. The grey told me I would love this ball of light in the future, as it would become my son. He referred to it as both a source and a complex system, and said I had known it since before my own birth. The grey began an intense mind-to-mind download consisting of 3 streams of information. The first just calmed my emotions and confusion. They wanted us to get to know each other, future mother and son, and they would observe how we related to each other. A second stream embedded extensive information into my subconscious concerning the purpose of this project, the genetics involved in the creation of my son's body, and the dual education he would receive on board craft, both as a child and in his source or soul state, which he told me had been enhanced and altered by them for a specific purpose. Finally, a third stream brought my mind back to the present as an 8-year-old child, and they left me to play with the ball for a while. I tried to relate to the ball by first asking it to bounce, but it just floated there unresponsive. I felt disappointed and sat down on the floor. Suddenly I felt as if I was being watched and became aware the ball was thinking at me. It descended down onto my shoulder and we were soon racing around the room, communicating happily. But all too soon the greys returned. They expressed satisfaction that the meeting had gone well. 2 of them took the ball of light away, and I felt deep sadness and longing. The grey assured me that we would meet again many times up until the day that this son would be born. So we returned to where the other children were interacting. In 1983, now aged 28 years old and near to full term in my first pregnancy, I was taken on board craft. My memory begins with me being assisted down a corridor by 2 tall entities, a mixture of species. They expressed concern for me as I had been ill throughout the pregnancy, and so they tenderly supported me as we entered a small room. They helped me onto a shelf-like bed, and we were joined by a grey. He explained that they were bringing someone to merge with me, and I was not to be concerned as everything would be fine. Holding his hand over my forehead, he told me he first needed to retrieve some memories from my subconscious mind, which had been embedded there in childhood. Immediately, my mind was filled with images, emotions, and memories of past meetings associated with a ball of blue light, and I became really tearful as I realised it was the soul of my child soon to be born. As he calmed my emotions, a group of ET children came into the room, bringing with them the now familiar soul or ball of energy. He stated these young entities had grown up on board craft with this soul, and they would play an integral part in supporting him in his life. There was a real air of excitement as the process of merging began. The grey slowed my metabolism right down to prepare my body for the intense energy of the soul, necessary to prevent shock to my body. During the hypnotic regression with Mary, my voice became really slow and almost indistinguishable at this point, and my body felt cold and numb. Slowly the soul entered my body and the body of my child-to-be. I felt infused with light and weightlessness as the grey slowly brought my metabolism back to normal again. He stated my son would be born late, which he was, and that he would be accompanied through his life by watchers, a terminology to describe a protective system they would provide for him. He added there are thousands of children being born in a world like him, part of an extensive project to create positive changes and accelerated evolution from within the human species.
These two experiences illustrate the complexity of the soul state and reveal extraterrestrial involvement with souls incarnating on this planet for specific purposes, but can also be enhanced, altered and educated by external forces or species. Now this is going to, for some of you, I think, be quite a difficult concept, and I understand that. But what it seems to be suggesting to me, and obviously Richard Dolan talked about it yesterday, that we are not just perhaps looking at the fact that we're looking at extraterrestrials, interdimensionals, transcendentals, and perhaps even some from our own future. But the bottom line seems to be, as this 15-year-old that was seeing Uncle Ted and Granddad as orbs of light, that they are also part of this big picture of these beings that we are interacting with or having encounters with. And there seems to be far more going on than we ever thought. And there is the sense that there is no actual separation in that sense. I think one thing I want to say now is that the abduction, the so-called abduction scenario, I participated in a thesis by Simon Harvey Wilson that was the comparisons between shamanism and abductions in Western Australia in 2000. And what Simon discovered was the parallels were quite fascinating in terms of transformation, healing, etc., etc. And my sense is that what we're seeing is a modern-day shamanic experience where we are being challenged to transcend our fears, to be prepared for our multidimensional nature. Now, you can take that or leave it as you will, but it seems to me that if they've bothered to change and alter our genetics and gradually enhance our abilities in the way that they're doing so that we can become multidimensional, why would they bother if it wasn't an agenda which seems to me to suggest we are being helped to change and to grow and to understand our multidimensional and the magnificent nature of what we could be, because I believe we all have the potential for that. And perhaps, just perhaps, they're giving us a helping hand, and I believe, from what I've seen so far anyway, that's the case.
Let's come together to open the new world era, to eliminate all conflicts and differences. It's time for everyone to join hand in hand. At last, now the world's beyond healing. It's time to change the world. As the one who knew in the past, in this period of our time, we will see before we depart this world, everyone must join hand in hand to change the world from darkness to brightness, from suffering to happiness, from ignorant to the knowledge one. Change the world, we have to do it easy way, and relax, be happy and joyful with childlike innocence. Everyone must join hand in hand. Gently close your eyes, relax, relax. Still your mind at the center of the body and look within. At the same position of the one who knew from the past. Change the world from the era of darkness to the era of light. From the old era to this new era, the world will be like heaven on earth. No class in societies. Everyone be living happy. Must be the same and live like this. Become as one with smiles all around. We'll be kind, the world will change. The world will change. Let's come together to change the world. Let's come together to change the world. Let's come together to change the world. Let's change the world. We have to do it the easy way and relax. Be joyful with childlike innocence. Everyone must join hand in hand. Gently close your eyes and relax. Still your mind at the center of the body and look within. As the light will hear from the crown of our shoulders, let's come together to change the world. Let's come together to change the world. Our enemies is many means. Let's come together to change the world. Let's come together to change the world. Let's come together to change the world. 让我们来一起改变世界。Welcome to the pretty place. Let's come together to change the world. 我们是给我们的生活的。Let's come together to change the world. 一生一世代的海洋。Let's come together to change the world. 让我们在更低落本里。Let's come together to open the new world era to eliminate all conflicts and differences. It's time for everyone to join hand in hand. At last, now the world's beyond healing. It's time to change the world. As the one who knew in the past, in this period of our time, we will see before we depart this world, and one must join hand in hand to change the world from darkness to brightness, from suffering to happiness, from ignorant to the knowledge one. Change the world, we have to Gently close your eyes, relax, relax. Still your mind, the center of the body, and look within. At the same position of the light will kneel from the past. Change the world from the air of darkness to the air of light. From the order on to this new era, the world will be like heaven on earth. No class, races, societies. Everyone be happy. Speak the same and live like this. Become as one with smiles all around. We'll be kind, the world will change. The world will change. Let's come together to change the world. Let's come together to change the world. Let's come together to change the world.